You lay out a full pound of bacon. The strips cover the entire skillet, edge to edge, overlapping. 10 minutes later, you're looking at a sad little pile in the corner of the pan that would fit on a single slice of toast. And if you've cooked the cheap stuff, you've seen something stranger than the shrinking. A white liquid seeps out of the strips before they even start to crisp. It pools, it foams. The bacon sits there boiling in it instead of frying, and you have to wait for that liquid to cook off before anything actually browns. Most people assume that's fat. It isn't. Fat is clear and golden, and it shows up later. That white stuff is something else. And here's what makes it worth 15 minutes of your time. The USDA has an official explanation for it, written into a federal food safety document. They know exactly what it is. They know exactly why it's in your pan, and they have never required anyone to tell you it's coming. But before you assume this is another story about water pumped in to raise the price, and I know that's where your mind just went, there's a federal rule that makes bacon different from almost everything else in the meat case. It says, in plain language, that finished bacon is not allowed to weigh more than the fresh pork belly it came from, not 1 ounce more. So the simple version of this story is wrong, which makes the real version much more interesting. By the end, I'll show you the USDA's own sentence about that white liquid, the reason a half pound of one kind of bacon can outcook a full pound of another, and the strange fact that the government forces ham to confess something on the front of the package that bacon never has to. But first, we have to deal with the shrinking itself, because a big part of it is completely normal, and I'd rather you know which part is which. Here's the number that reframes everything. According to the USDA, the cooked yield of bacon is around 40% of its raw weight. Read that again, because it's the honest floor of this entire subject. A pound of raw bacon becoming roughly 6 ounces of cooked bacon is not a scandal. It's not fraud, it's not a trick, and it's not a sign you bought the bad brand. It is simply what happens when you cook bacon. 60% of what you put in the pan is supposed to leave. Where does it go? 2 places. Bacon is a cut of pork belly, and pork belly is largely fat. When you heat fat, it renders. It melts out of the tissue and pools in the pan, which is exactly what you want because that's what makes bacon crisp. And meat itself is mostly water by weight. Heat drives that water out as steam, fat out, water out, and what's left is the concentrated strip of protein and crisped tissue you actually eat. So if you've been feeling cheated every time a pound turns into a handful, I want to release you from that. Most of that loss is physics. Any bacon, from any producer, at any price, is going to lose a large majority of its raw weight. But, and this is where the rest of this video lives, not all bacon loses the same amount. 2 packages, same weight on the shelf, same price per pound, can end up in genuinely different places at the bottom of the pan. And the reason has nothing to do with the pig. It has to do with what happened to that pork belly in the days before it was sliced. There are 2 ways to turn a pork belly into bacon, and they could not be more different. The first is dry curing. A pre-measured cure mixture, salt, nitrite, sugar, seasonings, is rubbed directly onto the surfaces of the belly, completely covering them. More cure may be worked in over a number of days. Then the belly hangs. According to the USDA, dry-cured bacon may be left hanging for up to 2 weeks to draw moisture out of the meat, and the full cure can run anywhere from about a week to a month, depending on the producer. Notice the direction of that process. Dry curing pulls water out. The belly hangs there and slowly dehydrates, concentrating the meat and the flavor. It takes time, it takes space, it takes labor, and the product loses weight the entire time. Weight the producer paid for and can no longer sell. That's exactly why dry-cured bacon is more expensive. Now the second method, which is what the overwhelming majority of supermarket bacon is, it's called pumping. The USDA describes it directly. Pumped bacon has curing ingredients injected into the meat to speed up the curing process and add bulk. Needles push a brine, water, salt, nitrite, sugar, flavorings, phosphates, straight into the belly. And instead of hanging for 2 weeks, this bacon is held for curing for 6 to 24 hours before it's heated. 6 hours versus up to a month. That's the entire difference in one comparison. And read the USDA's phrasing again, because they didn't soften it. Injected to speed up the curing process and add bulk. One process removes water over weeks. The other injects liquid in a matter of hours. Both produce something legally called bacon. Both sit in the same refrigerated case. And on the front of the package, neither one is required to tell you which happened. Which brings us to your pan and to that white liquid. Here is the sentence from the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service in their own bacon fact sheet. If not properly drained, pumped bacon can exude white liquid during frying. That's it. That's the answer to something millions of people have squinted at over a skillet and never gotten an explanation for. It isn't grease. It isn't a defect. It isn't spoiled meat, which is what a lot of people quietly worry. It's the brine. the injected curing solution, along with dissolved proteins, coming back out of the meat under heat and turning pale as those proteins cook. The federal agency that regulates bacon documented it, published it, and named the cause: pumped bacon that wasn't properly drained. And once you know that, the sequence in your pan reads completely differently. That period at the beginning where the strips sit in liquid and steam instead of sizzling, where you're standing there waiting for something to finally start browning, that's your bacon boiling off the solution that was put into it. You're not cooking yet, you're evaporating. Now, at this point, every other video on this topic would tell you that manufacturers pump bacon full of water to inflate the weight and charge you for it. It's a satisfying story. It's also, for bacon specifically, not what the regulation allows. And I'd rather hand you the truth than the version that gets more clicks. Here's the rule. According to FSIS regulations, the weight of cured pork bellies ready for slicing and labeling as bacon shall not exceed the weight of the fresh uncured pork bellies. That's a real constraint, and it's unusual. It means bacon cannot come out of the process heavier than the raw belly that went in. Compare that to what we've seen elsewhere in the meat case, where products are legally permitted to gain significant weight from added solution. Bacon has a ceiling, and the ceiling is the pig. So no, you are not buying a pound of bacon that's secretly a pound and a half of pork plus injected water. That's not the mechanism, and anyone telling you it is hasn't read the rule. But sit with what that ceiling actually permits, because this is the part that matters. The rule caps the finished weight. It does not require that the weight be made of the same things. A belly loses moisture during processing, and pumping puts liquid back in, up to that legal line, but not past it. So within a package that weighs exactly what it's allowed to weigh, the proportion of what's water versus what's meat and fat can shift. The dry cured belly spent 2 weeks losing water and arrives at the slicer concentrated. The pumped belly spent 6 hours gaining brine and arrives at the slicer carrying it. 2 packages, same weight on the scale, different contents inside that weight. And the pan is where that difference finally becomes visible to you, because everything that got added is exactly what has to leave. Wet cured bacon carries more moisture, so it shrinks noticeably more than dry cured bacon when cooked. The strip that spent 2 weeks drying doesn't have as much to give up. How big is the gap? Here's a claim worth knowing, with a caveat attached. One dry cure producer states that a half pound of their dry cured bacon cooks down to roughly the same net cooked weight as a full pound of typical store-bought wet cured bacon. Now, that's a producer describing their own product, so treat it as a seller's claim rather than an independent test. But the direction is not in dispute, and it lines up with the physics. Less water in means less weight lost out. If even roughly true, it reframes the price tag entirely. The expensive package isn't twice the price for nothing, it's a different amount of actual bacon arriving on your plate. So the label ought to tell you which one you're holding. And here's where this stops being about cooking and becomes a labeling story. Because there's a product sitting a few feet away in the same case that gets treated completely differently: ham. The USDA sorts cooked ham into 4 separate categories, and the category name has to appear on the label. They're graded by protein content because added water dilutes protein, which makes protein percentage a proxy for how much water went in. At the top is plain ham, at least 20.5% protein by weight, with essentially no added water. Below that, ham with natural juices, around 18.5 to 20.5% protein, with roughly 7 to 8% added water. Then, ham water added, 17 to 18.5% protein, with no more than about 10% added water. And at the bottom, ham and water product, under 17% protein and more than 10% added water, which has to state the percentage of added water right on the label. Look at what that system does. It takes an invisible property, how much water is in this meat, and forces it into the product's name on the front of the package where you cannot miss it. The 4 tiers even track the price. The top category can run several times the price per pound of the bottom one, and now you know exactly why. That's the government saying, this difference matters enough that the shopper must be told. Now go back to bacon. Same refrigerated case, same species, same wet curing technology, injected by the same kind of equipment. And there is no equivalent tier system, no bacon water added, no protein grade on the front, no required disclosure of whether this belly hung for 2 weeks or got needled for 6 hours. The same agency, regulating the same animal, decided the shopper needed to know for one product and not the other. I'm not telling you that's corruption or a conspiracy. Regulations get built at different times for different reasons, and the ham rules exist largely because ham is sold cooked and by weight in a way bacon isn't. What I'm telling you is that the information gap is real, it's specific, and it's why you've been standing over a pan for years, wondering what that white stuff was with nobody obligated to tell you. which means you have to find it yourself. And you can in about 10 seconds. Turn the package over and read the ingredient list. This is the only place the curing method leaves fingerprints. Dry cured bacon has a short list: pork, salt, sugar, sodium nitrite, maybe seasonings and smoke. That's a cure rubbed on a belly. If the ingredient list opens with pork and then names water, or lists a solution, or includes sodium phosphates, which are there specifically to help meat hold on to injected liquid, you're holding pumped bacon. The brine has to be declared in the ingredients, even though the method never has to be declared on the front. Second, look for the words dry cured or dry rubbed as an explicit claim. Producers who spend 2 weeks hanging bellies advertise it because it's their entire cost structure. Silence on this point is itself information. Third, be careful with a claim that's become extremely common and means less than it appears. Uncured, usually written as no nitrates or nitrites added. Federal rules require that phrasing when a producer skips synthetic curing salts. But the USDA also requires an explanatory statement noting that nitrates can occur naturally in ingredients such as celery juice powder or parsley. And celery powder is precisely what most uncured bacon uses. It's a natural source of nitrate that gets converted into nitrite, doing the same curing job. That's why uncured bacon still comes out pink instead of gray. It is cured. It's cured with a vegetable instead of a salt packet, and the label language obscures rather than clarifies that. Worth noting too, the nitrite limits actually differ by method. Up to 200 parts per million going into dry cured bacon versus 120 for pumped and immersion cured. Fourth, if you want to test any of this yourself, the pan is a lab. Weigh a package before, cook it your usual way, and weigh what comes out. Compare brands. That number tells you more about what you bought than anything printed on the front, and it costs you nothing but a scale. Let's ground all of this because this channel doesn't do panic. Pumped bacon is not dangerous. Brine curing is a legitimate ancient technique, and the modern version of it is regulated and inspected. Nitrite has a genuine food safety job. It's what prevents botulism in cured meat. And the USDA's own research on adding ascorbate and tocopherol to reduce nitrosamines led to changes in federal regulations that made the product safer. Bacon is a fatty, salty, cured food, and it always has been. Nobody watching this thinks it's a health food, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. If you like your usual brand, keep buying it. What's at stake is what you're paying for. You're buying by weight, cooking away most of it by design, and the share that leaves is partly determined by a process choice you were never told about. That's not a health problem. That's a value problem, and it's fixable in 10 seconds at the shelf. So, what does the package actually guarantee? The word bacon guarantees it came from a pork belly, and that the finished product doesn't outweigh the belly it came from. That's a real protection, and more than several other products in that case offer. What it does not guarantee is how the belly was cured, how much moisture is riding along inside that legal weight, or how much of what you carry home will still be there when you sit down to eat. The front of the package sells you a farmhouse and a smokehouse. The ingredient list tells you whether anything ever hung in one. So here's the 10-second version. Read the ingredients and look for water and phosphates right after the pork. Look for dry cured as a stated claim. Treat uncured as a description of the source of the nitrite, not the absence of it. And if you want the real answer, weigh what comes out of the pan. None of this means your bacon is fake or your brand deceived you. It means the most useful fact about that package, how much of it is going to survive breakfast, is the one fact nobody is required to print. The pan already knew. Now you do too. So go check the bacon in your fridge right now and read the first 3 ingredients. Does water show up in there? Tell me in the comments. Type water if it does, or pork if pork and salt are all you see. I have a feeling this is going to be closer than most of you expect. And if reading a package better than the people who designed it is your kind of thing, subscribe to Behind the Label. The next one you pick up, you'll turn it over first.